Hello, fellow griever. You have found the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast, and I am Melissa, your host. I am with you on this journey because my 21-year-old son, Alex, died by suicide on August 7th of 2016. Since launching this podcast in late 2020, I have followed my heart and expanded the Leftover Pieces to include books and an online community where I host Zoom support groups every week. It is there, in this community, that I lead other parents who have lost a child by suicide from survival toward hope and into healing. The website is also a resource hub, a connecting point for all survivors of suicide loss. You can find me, ways to connect with me, and links to everything that I'm doing in the community on my website, theleftoverpieces.com. Know that I'm always open to suggestions and feedback. And if you know someone that I should connect with to be on the podcast, please let me know that as well. So now, I invite you to join me for real conversations, candid talk on hard topics surrounding the loss of our loved ones by suicide. I talk to other loss survivors, mental health experts, advocates, and on alternate weeks, I offer shorter, solo episodes where I go down the rabbit hole to discuss things that have been on my mind or possibly parts of my journey that I feel would be beneficial to share. Every week, we explore the questions that haunt us, seek the courage to uncover the healing tools within us, and offer the comfort of a community that we all need so very much. It's true that our hearts and lives have been shattered, but come along with me, and together, let's choose to find meaning and even happiness amid the leftover pieces before us. Welcome. Hello, fellow griever, and welcome to the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast. And you may have already seen and been curious as to the length of this podcast is looking very short, but it's because this just is the introduction and you will have to actually go to the show notes to click to listen to the episode. Today I'm doing something I have only done a couple of times since starting the podcast, but I am going to be highlighting an episode of another person's podcast. Why am I doing this, you may ask? Well, in this particular circumstance, I am the guest on the podcast, and I believe it's a podcast that many, if not all of my listeners would benefit from putting in their podcast repertoire. The podcast is called Learn from People Who Lived It. The host is Mathew Blades, and for my episode, we also had one of his frequent co-hosts sit in, Dr. Frank Bevacqua. And I sure hope I said that right, Dr. Frank. And the episode he titled, Putting the Pieces Back Together After Losing a Child, was him asking me more about my journey. So the things that we kind of cover in this are how I was able to make peace with my guilt. What does a safe person look like? What is a safe person in our life? And why is it important that those are the people we find to speak to when we're struggling? I also talk about how, as a family, I have handled raising, or not raising, they're young adults, but how I've handled being a mom to my two surviving children, among other things. And I do think that it was I know I enjoyed the conversation a lot. I feel like there's things that I haven't said as much in my own podcast because I tend to focus on the guests that I'm speaking to versus my own story. So I feel like that this is one that you all might like. Matthew's podcast, just to give you a little bit about it, is about navigating painful life and circumstances that would be easier if they came with a how-to guide. And he considers this show that book, if you will. So if there was a book that was that guide, that's what his plan for this show has been. And there have been some really interesting topics that he takes on. He considers this show to be a mental wellness movement. So I think you would see, once you start taking a look at some of the guests he's had and the things that he talks about, how very committed he is to discussing sensitive subjects, including physical, emotional, sexual abuse, substance abuse, mental health disorders, and obviously even suicide. He talks about grief and loss and all of the things surrounding these items in the mental health world. So without further ado, I will leave this here and finish this part for today. But what you need to do next is just go to the show notes, and it's just right after that very first short paragraph. It says, listen to this episode here, and you just click that. I'm trying to make it super easy to do that. Wherever you're listening to your podcasts, you should have show notes, meaning it'll say, see the website of this episode. Some podcast players make it more obvious than others. But if you have any trouble with it at all, just go straight to Matthew's podcast, which is easy to Google. Learn from people who lived it. And this episode is called, bear with me for just a minute. The episode is called, I think, Picking Up the Pieces After the Suicide Loss of My Child. It was released on September 11th, and my name is in it, the title as well, with Melissa Bottorff-Arey. And so you could find it directly on your own podcast player that way as well, and that would give you a chance to be able to see some of the other amazing conversations Matthew has had with his other guests. Before I finish, I do want to make a couple of quick announcements and say that if you're not already registered for my email list, you should do so that you get the weekly communication from me. I do not bombard your email inbox. That's not my style. I don't like that done to me, so I try to never do that to other people. I do send out the weekly email, which is really just, I call it Musings from the Rabbit Hole, because it's usually just, it's just a touch base email. I just like staying in touch and offering tips that way as well, offering thoughts of what's going on in my mind. It's kind of almost a written version of a lot of what I do in my Down the Rabbit Hole episodes, where I'm just chatting about different things in my grief journey. This coming week, the newsletter will actually be an update on some of the changes and things that have been happening in the Leftover Pieces world, because while I try not to use that email for that, it occurred to me recently that it was time. It was time to update everybody on some of the things that were going on, and there will be a lot more going on in the next 2 to 4 months. So the only thing I would say to the newsletter or email list is, if that's not your thing, if you don't check emails and don't like to be on lists, just be sure you're checking the website, at least monthly. I do update it all the time. I keep my calendar up to date for the events that I do in my mom's community. And I have also been adding content and items that would be of interest to moms that are grieving, but also other grievers. Some crystal guides that have been added. My Grief to Growth course on healing your trauma is in there. And there will be new items being added regularly. And be aware that the February 7th Legacy Project, which next year there's only 2 start dates. One starts February 7th and one starts, I apologize, I don't remember the date in August, but it's mid-August. So those are the 2 start dates for next year if you're even remotely interested in making sure your child is remembered in a very permanent way in the world. This is an amazing project. I cannot say enough about how it has impressed me and how much the ladies that have participated have shown me the immense value in this project. So if you think you're even interested, we do have to have a discovery call, and I'd be happy to do that. You can schedule that and look at all that information right on my website. On the homepage, you would just go to the top and you would click support tab and go down to the one that says Legacy Project, Discovering You, I believe. And you'll find the other items. The support community is there, as well as the courses and downloadables that I'm adding and will be adding to over the coming months. So without further ado, let's finish this part and my ramblings and let you get on to clicking to listen to my conversation with Mathew and Dr. Frank on Learn from People Who Lived It. Talk soon.